2018 is a huge year for pickup trucks. All three of the top-selling vehicles in the US received extensive changes, with the latter two, the Ram 1500 and Chevy Silverado, being redesigned from the ground up. Now the Ram has been out since May and it has been receiving some seriously rave reviews. But now the Silverado has shown up and it's hoping to rain on the Ram's parade. So with that said, let's go ahead and directly compare these two fully loaded trucks side by side, and see who has executed the best redesign. So like always, the first thing we'll do is establish the pricing and option level of these two models. Starting off with the new Ram, like I just mentioned, we have the top trim called Limited, which starts out at $56,195. From there we have quite a few additional options, including a hefty $2,500 Level 1 equipment group, optional 5.7 liter Hemi V8, dual panel moonroof, trailer brake controller, and a handful of other small things. After adding in an enormous destination charge of nearly $1,700, the total rings in at $63,855. Next up we have the brand new Silverado, also in its highest trim, called the High Country. Like the Ram, it too starts out a little over $56,000. But from there we have the High Country Deluxe package, optional 6.2 liter V8, technology package, power assist steps, and a couple other things. With a slightly cheaper destination charge of $1,500, the total price is a stratospheric $66,425. That places the price difference at roughly $2,500, which I'd argue is not really too significant given that these are full-blown luxury items that cost more than your average Mercedes or BMW. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and see who's designed the best luxury truck. When you're paying this kind of money, one expects the full luxury experience, and that includes even small things like the key fobs. Both look nice, use soft touch materials and metallic trim, plus you'll also find remote start on both. As you can tell, both cabins have a very rich appearance. However, before we get inside, let's check out what's under the hood. So compared to the F-150 with all its turbo engines, these two trucks decided to stick with tried and true naturally aspirated V8s. Now between these engines there are plenty of differences, since Chevy basically gives you an extra tier of performance. The Ram has a 5.7 liter Hemi V8, making 395 horsepower and 410 pound-feet of torque. But the Silverado ups its regular 5.3 liter for one even bigger, which is something the Ram can't do. It is a 6.2 liter V8, making more power at 420 horsepower and more torque at 460 pound-feet. For the transmissions, Chevy joins Ford with having a 10-speed automatic, while the Ram keeps with an 8-speed automatic. And then as far as your fuel economy, as equipped with 4-wheel drive, they both offer the same combined rating of 17, even though they do have different city and highway numbers. Cylinder deactivation and auto start-stop are also on board for both. Now let's talk about driving. First of all, both these trucks are exceptionally quiet and isolated compared to trucks from just a few years ago. The Ram especially so, thanks to its class-exclusive air suspension, which makes the ride buttery smooth. As far as power delivery, both do an excellent job, but it's hard to beat the Silverado with more power and a transmission that never got confused despite having so many gears. And then as far as your maneuverability and handling, I'd say the two are neck and neck. So generally speaking, both are extremely pleasant to pilot. Well, that wraps up the basics of the powertrains, so now let's check out the exterior designs and specs. While I'm going to keep things as objective as possible, I will still take a moment to compare the styling in general. Starting off with the Chevy, of the two models, this is the closest to the outgoing model. It has a similar, though thoroughly modernized take on Chevy's signature grille. And it's also nice that there are bronze accents and high country branding to distinguish it from more plebeian trims. On the Ram, they have traded in the signature crosshair grille for a design that is smaller and more streamlined. For limited duty specifically, it has both chrome and matte silver around the outside edges, with a darkened chrome mesh on the inside. It cleanly flows right into the headlight cluster, which are fully LED. As you would expect, the High Country's headlights are also fully LED, but they have a more unique look since they are separated into 3 distinct parts. And then rounding things off, both use body-colored bumpers housing LED fog lights. Overall, up front, it really just comes down to personal preference. Now, most of the time, the rest of the styling would be pretty similar, just due to the nature of pickup trucks, but these two are actually pretty different. First of all, the Silverado has a shorter hood and more upright look when viewed from the side. And then around back, it's got the more interesting design with E-shaped LED taillights and horizontal exhaust outlets. The Ram also has dual exhaust and LED taillights, so once again, I won't award any points since the features are the same. Now let's go ahead and work our way around to all the other features. Starting off with the ground clearance, both offer plenty. But the Ram has the aforementioned air suspension, thus giving it a range from only 6.7 inches all the way up to 10.7 inches in its second off-road setting. The Ram also has the tighter turning diameter at 46.2 feet versus 48.5 feet for the Chevy. Of course, the overall styling is impacted a lot by the wheels, and for this, the Silverado's 22s simply catch the eye a lot more than the Ram's 20s. Both models do also have ventilated disc brakes in the front and rear. Next up are the mirrors, where the roles reverse. Both have heating, power folding, and auto dimming. However, the Silverados are mostly made from a cheap looking black plastic compared to the Ram's more upscale chrome cap. The Silverado does give you a side light, but it's also missing LED turn signals and the blind spot mirror that the Ram has. And speaking of blind spots, both trucks come with blind spot monitoring as well as a ton of other safety systems unheard of on trucks just a few years ago. Included within that are forward emergency braking with pedestrian detection, lane departure alert, auto high beam headlights, and for the Ram only, adaptive cruise control. While both the Silverado and Ram 1500 are available in a ton of different configurations, these trims have a more limited selection. They can only be had in the large 4-door crew cab configurations, but you can still choose between short and standard beds. For your warranties, they both get 5-year 60,000 mile powertrain warranties and 3-year 36,000 mile bumper-to-bumper warranties. However, the Silverado does give you a first maintenance visit complimentary. Moving on to towing, the Ram allows you to option on different axle ratios to increase the towing no matter what equipment you choose, while the Silverado won't allow you to combine the max trailering package with the optional deluxe or premium packages. That means that our Ram significantly beats the Silverado at 11,200 pounds versus 9,300 pounds. But you could increase that rating to 12,200 pounds if you're willing to go without the extra luxury features. One of the other really important things to think about are the beds. While these luxury trucks may never get dirty, you still have plenty of capability, with factory bed liners, tons of tie-downs, and LED lighting. The Silverado, however, adds a household outlet for powering tools, plus it has a class-exclusive full-power tailgate. And then as far as accessibility, the Chevy also delivers more, with dedicated steps in the bumper for rear access, and running boards that slide backwards to help with side access. Finally, we'll wrap things up on the outside with the fuel ranges. The Ram has a 26-gallon tank and the Chevy 24 gallons. So obviously, since they have the same combined fuel economy, the Ram can travel further on a tank of gas. Well, that pretty much sums up the practical exterior features. But now let's get inside and see which truck is going to spoil its owner the most. So first, looking into the cabins, it's frankly shocking that trucks have come to have this much luxury in them. Obviously, both are fully black with tons of contrast stitching and wood accents to class things up. Turning to the seats themselves, they are 8-way power on the Ram compared to 10-way on the Silverado, but both do have 2-person memory functions. Getting inside, each has a rich appearance, especially in the case of the Ram, where its materials would put a lot of luxury vehicles to shame. For starters, it is one of few vehicles at any price point to have leather across the entirety of the dash. And then in the middle, there is real wood, aluminum, and more leather. Around the edges of the screen is a different kind of aluminum, and then there is even more leather running where your knees would touch. These are definitely the best materials in a truck today. Now, of course, that would mean that the Silverado is not as good, but that's not to say it isn't nice. The upper dash is made from a stitched soft touch plastic, and the middle areas have a leatherette trim. On High Country, you'll also find bronze colored plastic trim, and some wood which may or may not be real, Chevy hasn't said. The same thing can also be applied to the door trims, where the Ram simply has more wood, leather, and metal covering things up. So overall, the materials point belongs to the 1500. On both, press the button to start. When you do, an 8-inch display will fire up on the Chevy, and a 12-inch one on the Ram. It definitely looks very impressive. Now, checking out the gauges, they look very different in design, but they're actually pretty similar. On the Ram, you've got a 7-inch driver's display with a busy design, and the Chevy has an 8-inch driver's display with a simpler design. Additionally, the Silverado does have a large head-up display, which is something the Ram doesn't have. Now, backing up to the steering wheels, they are both leather-wrapped, heated, and manually adjusting. However, in a related note, the Silverado has eliminated power adjusting pedals this year, so you're more likely to find your ideal driving position in the Ram. Now, in addition to the luxury, the inside also has to be practical, so both come with an insane amount of storage. The center console in the Ram has 2 tiers, but with everything opened up, the 2 trucks are about equal. There is even more storage in front of that, but the Ram's secret weapon is that all the storage can be fully connected to make one giant bin instead of separate ones. So when you combine that with the countless other little cubbies here and there, the Ram has the edge for the storage point. Unlike their rival, the F-150, both these trucks have shifters mounted up and out of the way to allow for so much storage. While you'd initially think that the Ram's electronic shifter would be a lot more finicky than the Chevy's column one, in practice, it's actually pretty easy to get used to. Both also come with very similar 360-degree camera systems, but you're going to find several more views available in the case of the Chevy. To counteract that, the Ram gives you automatic parking for both parallel and perpendicular spots. Next up, we have the climate controls, where even though the Ram has a Tesla-sized screen, there are still redundant physical controls on both sides, assuring that you can always operate it with gloves on. The Chevy also has physical controls, including for the 3-stage heated and ventilated seats, which allow you to separate back and butt for the heating. Now let's go ahead and sample the audio system. I realize the audio samples are not exactly comparable since they were recorded on different microphones, but in real life, the Ram's is just a higher caliber system. And now that brings us to the infotainment systems, which are very different. Starting out with the more traditional Silverado, it has the brand new Infotainment System 3. The graphics and resolution have been improved, and the logical layout make using the system very pleasant. Also on board are Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. As great as that system is, the Uconnect system is even better. There are 7 logical sections laid out across the bottom, and like the Chevy, everything is really high res. The thing the Chevy can't match though is the sheer size, so everything is either really big and easy to read, or the screen splits into 2 parts, giving you double the content. This is very handy for running Android Auto or Apple CarPlay up top, while still having the other stuff on the bottom. So overall, the experience is better in the Ram. Before we get to the back, there are a few more things I want to cover up front. Both mirrors are auto dimming, but only the Silverados can turn into a camera, cutting out all the obstructions. But fighting back, the Ram has an impressive panoramic moonroof, something which is missing from the Chevy. Now let's go ahead and finish off the cabin by checking out the rear seats. In the back, the luxury feeling continues since both have more legroom than Mercedes S-Class. The actual measurements are an insane 43.4 inches of legroom in the Chevy and 45.2 inches in the Ram. Headroom is also generous in both, with the Silverado having slightly over 40 inches and the 1500 slightly under. However, all of these numbers are too close to award a point. Once in the back, you'll find tons of amenities. Both have air vents and charging USB ports, but the Ram has twice as many and a household outlet instead of a 12-volt outlet. The seats also have some unique tricks on the Ram, since it's the only truck on the market to have power reclining and 3-stage ventilation. Those are things I have never seen on a vehicle under 90 grand. And lastly, one really nice touch that both trucks include are hidden rear storage bins, either behind the seat or under the floor. So with that, we wrap up another super competitive comparison. As you would expect, neither truck maker was messing around with their redesigns, and as the results show, these two trucks trade blows the entire way through. No matter what your brand allegiance may be, do yourself a favor and check out both of them in person. Thank you for watching, like the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you want to see more face-off comparisons and our signature full review videos. Take care.
Mm-hmm.